and it's better to stick with one parameter at a time. So I'm gonna stick with the same feed rate throughout the whole character. So now end feed rate is also 10. Same thing for the skip clocks. 9, 9, and then number of characters 10. Cycle start. Right back on the again.
На этом. А потому что это материал, то есть это уже реальный материал, и мы пытаемся откалибровать лазер на именно этот материал. То есть для каждого материала свои.
So the next thing we got to do here is do the laser characters. Yes. Just gonna probe. Here's our shutter tick on. All right. So I'm not going to touch it yet. It wants to do one more thing, perform the skim cut, and you want to select yes.
It does it on the.
It does it on the finish tool.
On the finish tool.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see the left? Oh yeah.
There should be.
Yeah, I can see it.
So now what you do is you take the piece, bring it over to a microscope.
У нас нет схем средней поверхности после нарезания делается лазером.
Да.
Не
Но это, да, на передней поверхности для меридиана делается лазер. А точки делаются на линзах, то есть обычно делают вот эти, чтобы посмотреть, как линза проворачивается. Я не знаю, зачем их делать. И там одну точку на правый глаз, две точки на левый. Они обычно делают,
чтобы отличать правую и левую.
Да.
То есть гравировки нет.
Да.
Если нет других средних. Если гравировать индивидуальный номер, то ты всегда ее отличишь.
So now find the characters and then angle it underneath the. You'll notice that the first character looks a little bit more narrow, whereas every character after that gets more and more.
Что я должен увидеть? Ну, посмотрите, то есть там вот подряд буквы R, и он говорит, что первая, она более тонкая, потому что мы увеличивали мощность лазера от 10 до 20 пока.
Мощность, не размер буквы, да?
Ну, мощность увеличивает размер.
Нет,
Ну
ну,
и...
букву можно увеличивать.
Нет, размер мы не увеличим, но мощность.
Мощность.
Да, то есть
Мощность и ширину линии.
Толщину линии.
Давайте посмотрим, у меня классно смотрится на гравировку.
So now what you would do here is you would pick your favorite character, find out which
Which
character
states?
Можно я
it
посмотрю?
is, and then
Вот прямо
copy
на
those
нее.
parameters.
То есть посмотрите, какой вам больше нравится, и вот те параметры и будете использовать.
It looks like, so if you you might need to like reposition it now.
Number 3, 4, 5 is okay.
You like
For
those?
me, yes.
So now we would see 12, 13, and 14. So we'll just go dead in the center. We'll go 13. So now what you'll do is you'll take this piece, put it back in here, and then
Надо такую штуку купить.
if you feel like you need to adjust another parameter, so if you found your power, right? If you want to go back and repeat the calibration and then set a range for, say, your feed rate or your skip clocks, you can do that. And then you can continue on and try to really refine the engraving to look really clean.
Там можно будет другие параметры тоже менять, если хотите.
Какие?
Вот этот фидовый.
Побах, да, кажется, меняется.
Вот эти там фидовые.
Все одинаковые.
Yeah.
Это тоже можно.
This
И
one.
Ryan.
Что это значит? Типа это расстояние между буквами?
Yeah, what is this? No,
The skip clocks,
yeah, is that how often the...
how quickly it strokes.
Да, то есть это с какой скоростью лазер работает. Я думаю, это лучше не трогать.
Я думаю, что это лучше не трогать.
Yeah, I think the power should be the
Окей,
only-
меня интересует
Yeah.
сам шрифт и...
Но это как
единица
уже,
текста.
это уже в этом сам, как
Где?
то есть это в application. The font and everything, that's in the application.
Yeah,
right? So-
yeah.
Окей.
So now, essentially, like, let's say we found our numbers. We have number 4. We're going to use 13, 1.5, 10, and 9. So I'll escape out of this calibration. I'll say no. I'll escape again. And then I'm going to go to the production menu. Production, contact lens. I'm going to go to the material tables. I'm going to select whatever material that I'm using. And then I'm going to go to the laser writing parameters. Now there's more parameters than what we were dealing with, but you really only want to worry about the feed rate, the laser power, the ramp start power, and then the skip clocks. So we said feed rate 10, that's good. Laser power, we're going to do 13, enter. Dots power, that is a completely different mode of the laser. You're never really going to be working with dots, so don't worry about that. Ramp start power, we're going to keep that at 1.5. And then skip clocks, we're also going to keep that at 9.
Where's clocks?
Skip clock, ну, то есть это с какой скоростью?
Окей.
We don't touch that.
The higher the skip clocks, the more intense the beam is going to be. The lower the skip clocks, the less intense the beam will be, or the engraving. F10 when complete. In order, so we set a password here. Enter, and then F10, and then escape. Now that's it for the operational calibration of the laser. There's one more calibration I want to go over with the laser, and that's the laser shutter tests. It's very easy to do. It's just to make sure that the sensor turns on and off with the shutter.
Это тест шаттер, то есть тест вот этой заслонки.
Shutter should be open. There should be no LED on the sensor.
Свет снизу, то есть там красный свет, его нет. То сейчас
It would be on the clear part right here.
То есть плата пошел сюда, да?
So now I'm gonna close the shutter,
Сейчас закрыли, вот красный свет горит.
and that's how it should be. When it's closed, LED is on. When it's open, LED is
Она
on.
открыта только тогда, когда мы гравируем, да? Если мы не
Да.
гравируем, мы ее закрываем от греха подальше, да?
Да, и глазом туда не смотреть.
Ну, а здесь однозначно. Ну, это не
So
понимаем.
that's pretty much it for tooling for calibration. So there's a few more things I want to go over here. There's a couple of troubleshooting things. I want to show you guys a few locations in the machine.
То есть сейчас, то есть калибрацию мы закончили, сейчас посмотрим, то есть если что-то не так идет, есть пара мест, на которые надо в первую очередь
Давайте
обращать
кофе
внимание.
купим.
Can you get coffee first?
Absolutely. Drill marker, the XLS. So that's covered. We even dived into some of this a little bit. So one thing we went over was the replacement of the air filters. We did that first thing.
Yeah.
So I'll check that one off. Instruction on proper procedure to clean the air bearing spindle. That's what we did. We removed the collet. We
Okay.
cleaned the inside of the spindle nose. And following that is the procedure to replace the collet and set the proper amount of pressure. We also did that as well. So there's a few more things I want to go over here. Introduction on DSP servo controller and related components. I'm going to go over what that system includes. Now, this is really just the DMC system. So at the heart of the DSP servo controller system, you have the DMC board.
Гарри, можно
DMC
красавцы?
board. То есть у нас вот это то, что все контролирует, то есть все движения контролируются вот этой платой. То есть это DSP Controller System, вот это DMC Board. То есть она
board.
называется DMC Board. Вот она контролирует все движения, которые происходят.
So this board essentially takes in feedback from the encoders.
То есть она получает информацию от энкодеров, то есть все, что вращается, там она получает информацию, на какой угол повернуть, насколько далеко прошло, то есть она собирает эту информацию,
As well as parameters coming from the amplifiers.
и вот это самые усилители, которые моторы питают, вот она отсюда тоже параметры берет, то есть она все это собирает.
And then, so what this does, the DMC sends signals out to then run the motors at a certain speed, position, and torque.
И посылает информацию, с какой скоростью, на какую позицию и с каким I forgot Russian already. И с каким моментом двигать туда-сюда мотор.
So really what is included in the whole DSP system is you have the DMC board which sends signals and takes in feedback from this interface module strip. As I said to you guys when we first started going over the components, the encoders are hooked up here.
То есть туда энкодеры подключены.
Now this terminal block has a cable right here that hooks up directly to the back of the DMC
Этот
board.
кабель подключается сзади к DMC board.
Now from these cables here, you're going to have signals coming all the way to these two interface
А
modules.
вот эти два кабеля уходят сюда к интерфейсу.
So now this interface module has mainly to do with the X and the Y
То
axis.
есть вот это X и Y.
And now this interface module has everything to do with the C and the A axis.
А вот это C и N axis. То есть это вот этот поступательный и and the A axis is which one?
So the A axis is the OT, so that would be the
Yeah,
oscillating
okay.
tool.
Yeah, the oscillating.
So now from
The C axis is the spindle. Okay.
Yeah. So now from the interface module strip, you have these cables here, then output signals to the amplifiers.
А вот эти кабели идут то есть передают сигналы на усилители.
So from the amplifiers, you have each amplifier has a motor cable connected to it.
И каждому присоединен мотор, то есть кабели для мотора.
These are directly connected to the motors
И они
of the
подключены
C,
к
the
мотору.
A,
Да.
the X, and the Y. And that allows for precise control over the speed, the position,
Вот это то,
again,
что
the torque.
контролирует скорость, позицию и момент, с которым.
And so that's pretty much it for the DSP servo controller.
Вот это
Now-
нули сюда должны быть, так? Какие?
А?
Нули, видите, обозначение?
So those zeros, do they mean anything?
So the zeros on the amplifier, that means the amplifiers are active and they're ready to be run given.
And then if it's anything other than zero, then
Yeah.
it's not good.
Well, so right now, if the amps are, so if you e-stop,
А, то
You'll
есть если
see that-
остановите, то у вас будет C.
Clamp, clamp,
Значит,
clamp.
что мы готовы работать.
Ага, а C это все.
C это значит остановка.
Now with the e-stop down, the amplifiers are going to slowly drain power. So eventually, you're not going to have a light on the C-axis.
А, то есть там у них есть конденсаторы, они постепенно разряжаются, и через какое-то время они разрядятся, и там света уже не будет.
Now they're U, and the U means under voltage.
А U значит андерволтаж, что значит не хватает напряжения, то есть они постепенно разряжаются. Там ничего не делать, включить. Сейчас он выключил.
So now the minute
То есть он вот сейчас включил и...
I turn the power on, they should all go to 0. Now, if the DAC software is not active, I've seen it where it doesn't exactly work like that. So if I close the software, which there shouldn't be a password for, but and I turn the amplifiers on. Sometimes when booting up the lathe, it won't give you a 0 right away. It might just stay clamped, but when you initialize the software, those might change
То
to
есть
0.
если софтвер не включенный, вы включаете, то может быть не нули будут, что-то другое, но нужно включить софтвер, чтобы он обновил. Но сейчас вроде обновился нормально.
So another thing is too with these amplifiers, what I use as a resource is if I ever have a question about the error code on the amplifier, you can search Veridin current mode amplifiers on Google, and it'll give you a spec sheet which will have inside the error
The error
codes.
codes would show here.
They would show on the LED.
Окей,
Output.
то есть это самое Veridin Technologies, вот вы можете посмотреть Veridin, вот Veridin
Current mode
current mode amplifiers, можно посмотреть, и у них будут error коды, то есть коды ошибок можно посмотреть, то есть если он что-то кроме нуля выдает, то можно на Google посмотреть, найти, что эта ошибка значит.
So I'll simulate an error on the x-axis. So if you press hard enough, see how it's an L now? So that's an overcurrent. So it basically just shut the servo off to the x-axis just from a little bit of pressure. And now you can see it's not servo. Now the process here of resetting the amplifier is you e-stop, reset the amplifier.
Нажал на кнопку, перегрузил его.
On these three, the reset switch is on the
Вот эта
side,
кнопка.
and on the C-axis, it's the white switch
А вот
to
это
the left
белая
of the white
кнопка
connector.
спереди, вот это reset. А то есть если какая-то ошибка,
Зависает?
то да, можно сделать.
And so now you should be back
Ты
up.
загружаешь, да, его
Да.
насильно?
Another error, let's say your 15 volts is out, or your temp is out. That
То есть если
lowercase
какой-то
h.
отключенный сигнал, то тогда получается там H.
So this cable right here specifically senses whether the motor is overheating or not overheating. And when that is unplugged, it'll give you the error that shows up when there is actually overheating on the amplifier. So this is just another example of an error that you would see with these amplifiers. Now, to reset the amplifier, you'll plug the cable back in, reset the switch, and then turn it back on. So now I'm going to shut down the lathe because I'm going to explain. So if you ever run into a scenario Let me.
Just wanted to update.
Yeah. I don't think that's gonna fix it, but we'll see.
Spindle tap.
It still wants to update. So one thing I want to go over is how to handle the boards inside the
Что сделал?
machine.
Он сейчас его выключает.
Typically we use ground strap.
Надо заземлиться.
We'll use something like this, and I'll show you exact. I'm gonna get my screwdriver in here.
То есть, если нужно что-то там поменять, надо заземлиться сначала. Он сейчас браслет. То есть есть специальный браслет, который в земле подключается, то есть чтобы в электронике не тыкать.
Я думаю, резину перчатки сделали.
Но наоборот. То есть это когда все отключено. Вот эту калибровку я могу, в принципе, кому угодно поручить.
All right, so there's a few troubleshooting techniques that I want to go.
Слушай, что делает?
Сейчас
Решение проблем.
решение проблем.
If you have a problem with either your X or Y amplifier,
То есть если проблема с одним из этих усилителей,
these two amplifiers are the same part number. And a good way to troubleshoot whether it's the amplifier or something on the output side of the amplifier, you can physically swap these amplifiers around.
то есть если какая-то проблема и вы хотите понять, она связана с усилителем или где-то в другом месте, можно поменять местами два усилителя, то есть вот этот X и Y, они в принципе одинаковые, их можно местами поменять.
So now with this amplifier, it's its own unique individual amplifier. So you wouldn't be able to do that with the A-axis, even though it looks identical to
Да,
the X and
с
the.
A-axis не получается, потому что он другой, а вот эти два, они одинаковые.
So now with the amplifier specifically, do you mind grabbing my voltmeter? Before working on an amplifier or replacing an amplifier, it is important to shut down the lathe. A part of that procedure would be to then turn the breaker off inside the cabinet over here.
То есть там выключить, отключить питание. Would you unplug it too, or
I would unplug it. So after I shut the breaker off here,
здесь выключаем?
I close that up. And then I
А
come
компрессор
over to the
надо
power-
отключать?
Не обязательно. Ну,
Шум.
он сейчас все отключит.
А,
and then disconnect the power cable. Should be cable 20.
Это он отключает.
So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the DC voltage. This is a bad voltmeter.
Ну да, потому что там конденсаторы.
Let me get a better voltmeter.
Я думаю, что этого не надо будет делать. Я надеюсь, что вы без этого избавитесь.
Я думаю, что мы вообще это делаем.
So one thing you need to make sure before doing any work or disconnecting any cables here, you need to check the voltage on the
ну, заземление когда будет включать?
amplifier. So you have 4.8 volts. You do not want to do any work until you get less than 1 volt.
То есть если больше, чем 1 вольт, ничего нельзя делать. То есть надо подождать. Is there a way to let it drain?
To dissipate, this would be the only way. So you would
just wait.
give it about 15 minutes
То
and
есть ждем
then
15 минут, и пока не спустится напряжение там меньше, чем 1 вольт. So you cannot just short it with a screwdriver.
yeah. Oh,
Соединяете все эти кабели, можно отсоединить. Are we gonna do it right now? Or?
I'm not going to
Yeah,
lose,
но
but
мы
I'll
сейчас
go
не будем
over.
делать.
Yeah, so you would remove the power cables.
Сначала питание, вот эти, которые слева, это питание.
Then you would remove the motor cable. And then there's 3 other cables on the side. So you
So
have
you usually take a picture before.
take a picture before and
То
then
есть сфотографируйте, чтобы в правильном порядке потом обратно вернуть.
it'd be good to reference the schematic too while you're taking these apart. So you have the cable 107, which is the signal cable for the IM strip.
Okay.
You have, this is the motor temperature cable. So you'd remove that as well. And then the 15 volts connector that goes into the side. So those are the
That's
three.
just pull, there is no lock on it.
Yeah.
Просто все...
There is a lock on the signal
А,
cable.
вот на этом кабеле есть ключ, то есть его надо отодвинуть, там защелка есть.
Now, with the A-axis, you'll notice that it's a little different than the X and the Y. You don't have a motor temperature cable, so you don't have to worry about that. There's only two cables on this side, the 15
one we
volts.
don't do.
Yeah, and then the signal cable.
And then once you remove the cables, what do you do?
There's only two screws that mount on each side of the amplifier,
То есть там два винта.
and they're a little bit buried. So they're all the way down
Oh,
there.
I see.
So
То
it's
есть там два винта, и их so one is Allen and the other one is
it
Phillips?
should be just Allen all the way through.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see,
Yeah.
I see. Вот там два винта, их надо открутить, and then you just pull it off.
And then you'll pull it out as soon as you get
Can
those
you
screws out.
just flip the cables?
You could.
If you're checking whether they are.
That's what I do for if I'm checking between the amplifiers and I want to swap the amplifiers around, you would just swap the cables.
То есть тогда не надо откручивать, то есть если вам надо проверить, это проблема с этими самыми, с усилителями или там что-то другое, то можно просто отсюда кабели привинтить сюда, и эти кабели привинтить сюда. И вот эти поменять, то есть местами поменять кабели сверху и снизу. И тогда у вас X будет, если там, например, Y не работает, вы местами поменяли, теперь X не работает. Значит, значит, с усилителем проблема.
You might run across a scenario where you actually do have to replace an amplifier. So say you swap the cables and you find that the problem stayed with the amplifier.
Yeah.
Then you would replace the amplifier. You'd have to remove the amplifier completely and then
So that's
put the
a
new-
simple maintenance. But
Simple.
how often do you see that? Like,
Not very often.
Okay.
Yeah. In the later years of the lathe, you may come across this with if it's under the right conditions. Say there's a lot of dust on the PCB of the board,
I mean,
which sometimes
voltage
happens.
jumps and
Yeah,
things like that.
exactly.
Okay.
So another thing I want to go over here is the electronic, the CPU boards and the DMC board. So the CPU boards are the same part number. So if you think you have a problem with your DMC CPU, you can take this board and swap it with this board.
Эти две тоже можно платы поменять. Они одинаковые.
No, the only thing you need to pay attention to is this little USB chip that's on the top DMC board needs to stay on the DMC side. So if you do swap those around,
Вот этот надо поменять.
that chip
местами.
needs to stay on top.
То есть если вы меняете местами вот эти две платы, то вот этот чип, который наверху, вот этот USB, то есть его надо будет переставить тоже.
Now with the bottom board, the CPU, the host CPU, there's a lot of cabling here, more than the cabling up here. I'm just going to point it out. So you have a few switches right here. You have the power cable that's hooked up behind the switches. You have these communication cables coming from the hard drive. And then the other one comes from the CD, DVD right. You have some USB connections which hook up to the USB extension.
Там вот эти все подключения есть. Драйвы, жесткие CD,
And then you have a PCI expansion cable.
PCI есть. And then the top one doesn't have.
The top one only has the disc on chip. It has the switches and then the power cable. Yeah. So now I'm going to simulate how you would go about removing a board. We'll do the DMC because there's not a lot of cables there. So typically what you would do is you would wait for the power to be completely drained from the machine. You'll see the LED on the motherboard go out.
Да, то есть
That happens a lot quicker
свет
than these.
выключается на материнской плате. И, то есть если мы хотим поменять, то есть если платы надо поменять, то тогда вот ждем, выключаем, ждем, когда свет закончится, заземляемся.
So I'm gonna put my ground strap before I start touching anything within the computer. I'm gonna start off by taking the cable out of the back of the DMC.
Отвинчиваем кабель. And how, like, why would you need to do that?
So this would only come up if you ever see problems with, say, motion control. Say you start to lose position with multiple.
Если только если ошибки происходят, только в таком случае.
You
And
would,
then we would order a replacement board from you guys and
Yes.
just replace it.
yeah, and this is a very easily replaceable.
Да, то есть это, то есть тогда надо будет заказать замену и поменять эту плату.
So now what I'll do is I'll take these cables.
Зачем вытаскивать? Зачем вытаскивать?
I mean, he's saying that it's okay. I mean, there's no need to show.
Oh, you guys, are
We've
you
all
okay?
been there, yeah. Yeah, I
Okay,
think it's
all right,
fine, yeah. There's
cool.
no
Yeah, yeah, so you would just essentially take it out.
Yeah, take it out.
You
and
would
then
put it in
back
anti-static bag. If it's gonna be fully removed from the machine, just use anti-static.
То есть в этот антистатический этот самый мешок положить, чтобы оно не... But if you're replacing it, then you don't care.
Yeah, you can just get rid of it, yeah, yeah. You would hook
Yeah,
that up,
there's no need to.
go through the whole process here. Yeah. All right, that's that.
Yeah, I mean that's actually some like a computer tech rule.
Absolutely, yeah, and they should know how to clean the board if you're ever necessary. Sometimes it might just be contamination on the board. So other than that, let's take a look at the list. So that is, we've gone over DSP server related components. We've gone over how to handle electronic boards within the computer. We talked about, next, I'm just gonna briefly go over the fuse locations in this machine. So underneath the servo chassis, you have a terminal block called TB11. And so you'll see there's a set of fuses that go all the way across. You have several different voltages here, AC and DC, and they're all fused at this block going to the servo chassis. Now, if a fuse goes out, an LED may come on.
Do you have extra fuses that will come with
We
this?
do, yeah. So that'll be in the accessory kit as well, yeah. So now, I'm sure you guys already know how to test a fuse, but if you need to test a fuse, you'll set your multimeter to ring or continuity. Check your multimeter,
То есть вот так тестируют.
and then it should ring if you touch prong to prong. And that tells you that the fuse is okay. So now, aside from these fuses here, there's some fuses on the other side of the machine I just want to show you quickly. All right. So we have the fuses that I showed you earlier when we first started working on this on the power supply. This is a 16 amp 250 volt fuse. This fuse is the laser.
То есть это для лазера предохранитель 16 ампер 250 ампер.
This fuse right here, F19, I believe is a 2 amp, and it fuses the 5 volts.
То есть это для 5 вольт 2 ампера.
Now the 5 volts gets distributed to a lot of sensors, but also the encoders need 5 volts of power.
То есть это для сенсоров и энкодеров.
So now if this if there was a spike in electricity and this wasn't here, it could damage the encoder. So that's why this fuse is where it is. Now this fuse F21 is for the 24 volts. Now the 24 volts powers a lot of signaling. It also has a lot of sensors up here that are connected to the 24 volts. You'll notice that there's 3 more fuses up here.
Там еще 3 предохранителя.
Now these are for 24 volt sensors. They all have LEDs. So if you see the LED turn on, there could be a chance that the fuse is bad. And you can double check that by checking the continuity. So aside from the fuses, you have your breakers here as well. So if you ever need to troubleshoot a power issue, if you find something's not working properly, you're not able to turn on your amps, it's a good thing to just check your breakers, check your fuses, make sure your fuses are seated, make sure your fuses have continuity. And that's a good way to troubleshoot what might be going on with your machine, because if you come in and you say, hey, F21 is blown, this is not working, that gives us a lot of good information on helping you troubleshoot the lathe. So another thing I want to go over is testing voltages on the power supply. So if I was to get my voltmeter, and I'm going to turn the lathe back on. My voltmeter. So you have AC and DC voltages. I'll start from the left. You'll have 208 AC right here.
Там 208 вольт.
Same with CV5 and CV6. So if you test the output, it should read 208, 210. Same deal here. You should also have 208.
Там тоже 208, 209.
As you move over here, you'll start to see that you get lower voltages. This right here is 115. So if you put the ground here, and you put this here, you should get 115. And you can test the output side of the breaker. It should read the same. Now, another voltage that you have on the power supply is the 40 volts. Now, I'll just tell you right now, the 115 is supplying the C-axis amplifier,
Okay.
which then gets converted at a bridge rectifier to DC voltage, which turns into 160 volts going to the amplifier. The 40 volts is dedicated to the X, Y, and A. So if you have a problem with your 40 volts, you're probably going to see an issue with your X, Y, and A amplifier.
40 вольт это X, Y и A, а 115 вольт вот этот желтый, он это для C, для спиннера.
So you should read 40 volts there. So now after the purple 40 volt wires, you're going to get into the DC side of things.
После, то есть это все было AC, то есть переменное движение, а после вот этих фиолетовых уже синие, это идут DC, то есть постоянно.
So the 5 volts and the 24 volts is grounded on the same spot. So if you need to check the 5 and the 24, a good place to put your ground or your black probe would be on the ground to the left of CV19.
Вот это там, где земля, он проверит справа и слева. Это 5 вольт.
That's the 5 volts there. That's ground. And then 24 volts right here.
Там тоже 24 вольт.
So that's it for right here. Unfortunately, in order to test these power supplies out, something to look out for when you're looking at these power supplies, the LED. Sometimes with contamination within the lathe, say dust starts to fall inside and it starts to build up and it shorts something out, the LED might start to dim. And that's a good sign that you either need to test.
На яркость вот этих, если они становятся тусклыми, то значит может быть что-то не то.
And so you can't always rely on the LED though. The LED might be on and full, but yet the voltage might not be outputting what it should be. So a good way to test these two right here, PS2 and PS7, you can't test PS4 and PS1 because they have push-in connectors, but you can test, this is specifically for the monitor.
То есть это для экрана можно проверить.
And that'll be 12 volts.
12 вольт.
And that should read the way it is on the actual power supply. So this says 12 volts, 55 watts. You can test on the plus and minus of the output that it reads 12 volts. Now same deal for the PS7. This is a 24 volt power supply. You put the red on the positive, black on the negative, and it should read 24 or around plus or minus 10% of 24. So again, if you want to test the 5 volts, the only place you can test the 5 volts is on this side of this terminal block, on the back side of that fuse.
То есть 5 вольт только там можно проверить.
And then the same thing for the 15 volts. Unfortunately, the 15 volts goes straight to the amplifiers. So you would have to test at the amplifiers on the connector.
Окей, то есть 15 вольт здесь невозможно проверить. Нужно, то есть это идет на усилителе сзади, то есть там надо проверять.
To keep going through troubleshooting techniques here, this is just all good information here. So if you're having trouble with air to say your X or Y axis on your air valves, you have a manual switch where you can turn the air on and off. So
Здесь можно воздух вручную включать и выключать.
if I have the E-stop down and I manually press in an air valve, and this is for the X-axis. Oh, that's the Y.
То есть это вручную можно
There it is.
нажимать.
So you are able to confirm that there's actually air.
То есть это проверить, воздух идет или нет.
Occasionally you'll have a solenoid that goes bad, an air valve that goes bad.
То есть если там этот самый, иногда если выходит из строя, то можно нажать проверить.
If
То есть там соленоид есть, если он из строя выходит, то можно нажать проверить, работает или нет.
so, if you press that button and you get air on that valve, it's a good chance that the air valve's working correctly. It could be the cable going into the solenoid of the air valve. So it's good to check these cables, make sure they're seated correctly. Another way you can make sure that it's the cable that is the problem, or if it's not the problem, you can take, say, AV2008 or AV2009, you can just swap these cables around. And if the problem resolves after swapping the cable,
Да, то есть можно проверить, если это кабель, просто поменять местами два кабеля, посмотреть, если что включается, что выключается.
again, while we're here, I just want to kind of go over these two contactor relays. When you hit the main power to the lathe, this contactor will close.
То есть основной тот самый, когда напряжение подано, то вот это реле оно включается.
This allows for the 208 volts from the input to make it to the output, which then feeds the power over here. So if this isn't working correctly, you're not going to get power in this area here.
То есть если там не работает, то тут не будет напряжения.
So now this contactor relay, this only engages when you hit the amp power on button. So you'll hear that clunk when you hit the amp power on. That is this contactor closing the circuit.
The red button.
The blue button.
The
Yeah.
blue button.
Yeah.
Okay. То есть это только когда на синюю кнопку там нажимаем,
Только в этом случае это регулировано.
You can see this signal here. This says amps enable. This is coming from the interface
То есть
modules.
это синий кнопка, это amplifier mode, то есть это напряжение на усилитель.
And this signal here, Y11, goes directly to the PLC. So it's communicating with the PLC. It gives it the condition that the amplifiers are in. And if you have a problem with this signal, Y11, if the conditions aren't met, then you're not going to be able to activate the K1
Если
contactor.
там проблема, то здесь не будет.
So when I say the conditions, there are three conditions that you need in place before activating the amplifier. Air has to be active on the machine.
Нужно, чтобы был сжатый воздух
You have to have it above 75 psi.
больше, чем 75 psi, это дюйм на квадратный, фунт на квадратный дюйм.
The DMC needs to be enabled and not exhibiting any error or anything like that.
DMC, вот этот борт, который сзади плата, то есть она должна работать, и включена должна быть.
And then you need 24 volts on the safety relay system. So in order for the safety relay,
И нужно 24 вольта на вот этих реле.
I don't want to get too far into this because I feel like we're kind of getting a little bit more advanced here, but this
Yeah, I agree.
K1 is tied in with the safety relay
Окей,
system.
то есть это здесь это подключено к безопасности, к системе безопасности.
Now, one more area right here. This is called the safety relay. It's
that's
just
a
a
safety
safety measure. So it pretty much protects you from turning on the amplifiers when there's some sort of fault in the electrical system. So you want to have 24 volts, and the way you know you have 24 volts going to the safety relay system is if this device LED is on.
То есть если вот это зеленый свет включен, то значит это реле работает. То есть девайс там, где написано девайс, там должно быть зеленый свет.
Now you'll notice when I release the stop and press amp power on, it's going to initialize here. No, it's not. You'll notice that the output light is now on.
Okay.
And now if we go back to the K1 relay, it's hard to tell, but you can see that the center, there was a button that was kind of up. It's now
Он
closed.
сейчас включился, это реле включилось.
So K1's working properly, the amps now have power. So we'll keep moving on here. Okay, that's done. Enter, enter. Amplifier fault x-axis. Okay, enter. We're gonna shut down, shut down.
Did you break it?
Did we break it?
Что-то не подключили, да?
Вот так вот. Ничего не открывай.
I've seen that happen when the fuse on the DMC board blows.
So what happened this time?
So it just seems like it needed a reset.
Okay.
I had been messing with things. Sometimes when you disconnect cables and mess around with the amplifiers, you'll put it in an error state, and it'll if you don't shut down properly.
And then the fuse on the DMC board, where is that?
So the fuse on the DMC board
that's
is
the
right
fuse.
here.
То есть очень часто вот если что-то происходит, то из-за этого предохранитель, предохранитель может.
And you can test continuity with your probes on both ends of
Там
the.
можно проверить, он нет.
So Now that we're back in the software, TI menu. To access the TI menu, it's really just a test menu for applications and the technicians that are helping you remotely solve what's going on with your lathe. Control F2 at the same time.
Control F2 выходит на TI меню, которое просто для тестирования того, что происходит.
So this is going to bring up a lot of information that is crucial for what is going on with your lathe. For example, you have absolute position, AP, commanded position, position error. You have some voltage readings. I can't go all through all this. I'm not 100% versed on
But
it.
is there a little sheet that tells you if this reads this, then something?
Yeah. So really the ones that you want to pay attention to down here are CS, AS, and
Вот
then
эти две последние CS и AS, они вот говорят, что что-то происходит.
AS.
How do you know something's wrong?
So AS is the DMC's signal of whatever is going on with a specific amplifier. So you have the X-axis, the Y-axis, the A-axis, and the C-axis. You'll notice that there's a bit on one, a bit on one, and a bit right there,
No AS.
and no A-axis.
Okay.
So now if you type in HE down here, it's going to bring up a list of commands that you can input into TI. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom to AS. So I think it was the third one in.
Yeah.
The V out was limited. We see the V out was limited pretty often with the X, the Y, and the C.
Okay.
Now, what you want to look for, if you ever run into an issue where your X-axis is not allowing you to initialize or your Y-axis is not allowing you to initialize, I would have you go to this screen and then record what is being shown for the AS.
То есть, если что-то происходит, он идем вот на этот экран и смотрим, что произошло,
Где
что он
проблема?
выдает ошибки, коды ошибок.
So we have the negative and positive limit here. So essentially, if I bring the,
То есть это он доходит до...
you'll see the bit turn on for the negative limit. Same for the X-axis. Negative limit. Positive limit. Now, one more thing I want to show you here is really useful is you can actually view the encoder signals through the TI menu. You use the command AS and then whatever letter axis you're using or you're trying to check. So if it's the X-axis, it'd be ASX, enter. Now this is going to show you your A and your B signal.
Oh, wow.
You want the amplitudes to be about the same. If you see one signal a lot smaller than the other, you know you have a bad AB ratio on your signal. A better way to view this signal and an easier way for us to see the signal is the Lissajous pattern. Now, this signal should be between the fourth and the third ring. You don't want to see it ever past the fourth ring because then you have the risk of the signal clipping. And when I say clipping is basically if it's too big for this graph to see, it'll cut the signal off at a certain point and that'll trip out your amplifier and your encoder signal. So you want to see it within
Yeah,
this
but I
ring.
think that's not for us.
No. So, although we would throw it, we might, here's a scenario. You guys have your A-axis or your X-axis go down. We then remotely ask you to go into
this,
TI
Okay.
and then type in the signal and send us a picture of the signal. Same deal for the Y-axis. C-axis is a little different, so we don't personally do the C-axis. We have LoadPoint do the encoder signal. So you might not see it within the third and the fourth ring, but we physically do the X, the Y, and the A. So you're gonna see those within the ranges that we prefer them.
То что он проверяет все?
То есть он не очень понимает, то есть он проверяет, то есть в зависимости от того, как вот эти фигурки выглядят, можно понять, там энкодеры нормально работают или нет. Ну, не очень, наверное. То есть,
По программе обучения, да?
да. То есть, может быть, будет нужно, если они ремокеры скажут, вот, подергайте там такой-то аксис, войдите в такое-то меню, и вы там покрутите. Да. Ну, да. Yeah, I don't think they. I think this is one of those things where
More
we'll
advanced.
forget,
More advanced, yeah.
and then you'll have to explain,
Sure.
okay, do this. like,
And that's
move
exactly
this.
what will happen. Yeah. So I'm not going to spend too much time with that,
Okay.
but that's how you access the TI menu. Control F2, and just know that there's a lot of commands that you can input
Okay.
to really test what's going on with the lathe.
Что сказал?
Проверяем
Просто
alignment
что
спиндла. Проверяем alignment спиндла.
Насколько шпиндель этот
Шпиндель, точно.
стоит ровно, да?
Да.
There is a calibration located within the edit menu called check spindle alignment.
У нас есть within which menu?
The edit menu
Edit menu есть
Of the
check
calibration.
spindle, calibrate
Calibration
or check.
calibrate spindle alignment. Sorry,
Calibrate spindle alignment. Okay.
and then F2 to show, F10, and that'll show up in the miscellaneous calibrations you have down here. So now I'll just run it to kind of find where exactly it's going to be, because I'm needing to set up a dial indicator on the nose, and I want to know exactly where it is going to land when I run this program. So set up the indicator on the nose. Let's pretend that we did. It's going to move backward in that direction, and then we're going to repeat. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll grab my dial indicator.
But didn't we do that with the metal yesterday?
The gauge pin, right?
Yeah.
So this is a little different. That would be the call it runout.
Oh, okay.
This is going to be
The spindle.
the spindle's actual alignment to the X and the Y axis.
How often do you see that being?
Only if there's a crash on the machine, and sometimes crashes happen. So it's just good to know that this is something that you can check. So now
Crash means that it basically was running and then
something ran away and the machine was crashed into the X and the Y axis make contact with each other, or it even could be the spindle nose that takes the brunt of the collision. This is where you want to set it up. So you want to set it up on the left side closest to you, and then you want to put about a half turn on the dial. Right there. And then I'm going to repeat the test. And you want to see within 2 microns. And you'll see there, I'm going to repeat the test.
то есть не должно двигаться. Oh, so you're going back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see maybe 1 micron there.
Okay. То есть меньше 2 микрон.
If that, yeah. And that's how you check the spindle alignment. So I think that kind of covers everything that I'm needing to train you guys on.
Okay.
Now I want to end this by saying you guys will have all our remote support, but what I want to do, since you guys are brand new, is get the newest manual approved for me to send that to you guys, because what that has in it is it has daily maintenance routines, weekly maintenance routines. It has step-by-step procedures for every single calibration on the lathe, even the options. So this is something that you guys could give to your engineers, and they could review this before even working on the lathe. But yeah, no, I think that'll probably be good. And then, you know, I'm sure you'll talk to Lonnie or whoever it may be about training at Astana.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I need to talk to Lani about Astana and then also in St. Peter.
yes,
So,
yes,
both.
absolutely.
So yeah, and then so hopefully when somebody comes to Astana, they will do a refresher because there's
Yeah.
going to be a fresh set of eyes looking at the
Sure.
whole process.
So essentially what's going to happen is we're going to have to calibrate the lathe all the way through. So it'd be a good opportunity for whoever comes, for you to have whoever it may be shadowing whatever they're doing with the
Yeah,
lathe.
okay.
Starting from the top with the YLS all the way through the tool post,
Okay.
to the options, and to pretty much everything required in
Yeah.
setting up the
So we can basically tell them, okay, slow down, let's
100%.
talk through the process.
Yeah, yeah.
Да, то есть они когда придут, будут калибровать, вы их попросите, чтобы они объясняли весь процесс постепенно, то есть по второму прошли.
2 дня уже это или
Нет, там.
там-то понятно.
В Астане, да?
Да. Окей.
Perfect.